Welcome back to the Business Roundtable Podcast. I've got a brand new guest this week. I'm super excited to have Christy Pretzinger with us. And Christy and I have been talking actually before we recorded this, and I've had some meetings beforehand. And we just thought we had a great topic that as I was sharing with her, and I love having women business owners on this podcast because I think it really helps even those women that are not business owners that are just up and coming in the workplace. They love to hear from folks like you, Christy. So welcome to the podcast. Christy, you've got a varied background. So you've done a lot of different things, but I would love to have you just share with the Business Roundtable Podcast as our newest guest a little bit about yourself, your background, and then we'll jump into our topic about leading with kindness and how you've incorporated that into your business and culture.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me, David. I've really been looking forward to our conversation after we first met. I think that it's going to be a good conversation. I love sharing my business journey, especially with other women business owners,
Yes.
and sharing what I've learned and seeing how I can help them.
Absolutely. So we were talking about, authentic leadership earlier, but we got on here. How do we show up authentically? And really the question is, I think, can kindness, coexist and with accountability and growth in business? And I think you and I were talking about sometimes that this is different than nice. This is being truly kind and in creating that culture, and just how you've been able to do that successfully. And so what's kind of for you, the foundation of kindness? Where did you find this? What along your journey? And okay, I can be kind, I can be successful as a business owner.
It's funny. I think I shared with you that when I started building my business 30 years ago, I actually not 30, it was 20 when I was building this one. And I said to my accountant at the time that if I couldn't build a business based on kindness, I would go back to being a freelance writer, which is what I had been doing. And then I kind of forgot about it as you build a business and you wear all the hats, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're doing all the things, but it was an intention. And it was only in hindsight that I could actually, as you get older and wiser and you have some experience, you look back and you see the important role that intention played in what you then did in your life. So for me, the kindness, it wasn't that I had worked for unkind people.
Mm-hmm.
It was that the structures within which they worked didn't foster kindness. And again, I wouldn't have known that at the time. It's only something that I can look at in retrospect and see that information has informed how we've structured the organization and all of the things that we've done to enable people to be kind to one another and for the processes to foster kindness. So it's really been a backbone of kind of who I am anyway.
Yeah.
And then, I think I always cite this one. There's that book called There's No Such Thing as Business Ethics. There's just ethics, right? So I always just think you either are kind or you're not. And you're not kind at home and then mean at work.
Yep.
So it's just who you are. So that was always my intention. And then I think people were attracted to that. It attracts so people that they kind of like, whether they knew it or not, they were kind of vibing with that energy. And then it's really kind of grown from there.
Yeah, no, I love that. I mean, leading, really what I hear you say is that was one of your core values of kindness, leading with kindness, leading yourself and across all areas. And I do agree with you. As we embrace this, you're going to find people that are like, that's something different. And I think leading in who you are just authentically, Christy,
That's so important. For a while, I would get kind of the word authentic was so overused when Oprah started doing it, right? But the reason it's overused is because it's important. It really is being true to yourself and being able to be proud of who you are and how you show up in the world. And so for furthering into the organization, what then happened when we created values as a team, because I think that's important that they are created as a team to make sure you have people buying in and that you all agree this is who we are.
Yes.
So our values are, we are empowered, curious, kind, and fun. So kindness is definitely right there.
Yes. Well, I love that too. You said that you're building with a team, because I think this is a transition, especially if you're I think we might have talked about this previously as well, but the previous company, one of the previous companies I was with a woman business owner, we had to not, I say separate is the right word, but we had to be able to create the organization to stand beyond just who she was as an individual and the founder. company? What is this company, this organization going to be beyond you?
Mhm.
Being intentional, like you said, creating the
Mhm.
structure or the framework that we're going to build on, right? That
Mhm.
foundation.
Yeah, very much so. And especially when your business is younger, I
Mhm.
usually use that term instead of smaller because it's really just younger.
Yes, that's a good
Um,
point.
and one of the important things that I learned was learning to hire to replace myself. So
Mm,
again, when you're the business and you're the salesperson, and then you're the one who operates and you do the accounting and you do all of the things,
yep.
it's so key to finding people that can replace you. And what I frequently say and find to be vastly important is making sure your ego is not in the way, that you hire people who are smarter than you in that area. If you are under the impression that you're the best at something, well, then congratulations, you bought yourself a job.
Yes, right.
And my intention was never to do that. I wanted to lift other people up and also get to the point where I could work on the business, not in the business.
Absolutely. No, that's so important. I think you and I are talking about that book about the E-Myth, and that same concept of,
Yeah.
and I'm working with a business owner just on that very aspect, Christy. She loves working in the business at the time, but she recognizes to get the business in a healthy place. Not that she wants to sell the business, but right now, but like you said, Chris, you've got to make it that way.
Yeah.
And you have a culture that people want to be there and and
Mhm.
and and are attracted to, you know, that's really important. That's, I'm like, why are people staying with your company for so long? Because they believe in this bigger picture. They love that the empathy and the kindness, like you said. It's a fabric. It's weaved in. I loved how you just rattled off your values of being fun and curious. And I think those should be flow throughout the organization. It shouldn't be somebody says like, let me go find that. Where was that again? Who are we? What
Right.
are we about? Right?
We very much I always tell people, I wrote about this in my book, that your values should be constant. The
Mm,
expression of your values could change over time, but you want the values to be constant. And I always say that they are a thread that flows throughout your organization and upon
mhm,
which all decisions can hang. So
mm,
people can actually think about that and think, okay, am I empowered to make this decision?
yep.
Am I being kind in the way I'm making it? Have I been curious to find out all the things I need to know?
Mhm.
And hopefully you're having some fun while you're
Yes.
doing that too.
Well, I mean, this is so important for those of you maybe that are in the younger stage, like you said, of the business, because sometimes I work with business owners, Christy, and they're struggling with getting response from their employees. And I said,
Mhm.
is it clear, like what you just said, are the values that we're all ascribing to? Because if it's not clear, then you're going to have some challenges. Because if teamwork is one a clear value to you, and you come up to the person and this is where I think an example of kindness, saying, look, you know what, we all are saying we want to be team members together. We all want to win together, and you're constantly not getting your reports in, you're not getting things, and you're not being considerate of the team. So if you are you truly committed to this or not? And I think that's I mean, obviously I'm being a little bit blunt, but here, there's a kindness in there of like calling them up, right? And
Mhm.
how maybe talk a little bit about how you've been able to be kind and call people up, not necessarily calling them out. That's kind of a thing that I like to distinguish, Christy,
Right.
you know?
I would say that in fact, we just did a mastermind class about
Mhm.
accountability with empathy.
Yes.
And one of the ways that we try to do this is, if someone starts doing something like you just said, if they start missing deadlines or they're showing up late to meetings, and this is talking about a change in behavior,
Yeah.
that somebody changes like that, that instead of calling them up, what we would say, the leader would say after a meeting or something, saying, hey, can we talk about this for a minute? I've noticed that,
Mhm.
your behavior's changed, late to meetings, missing deadlines. Can you tell me what's going on? And give that person an opportunity to address it, not in
Yes.
excuses, but like something could be going on and you don't know about it.
Mhm.
And then that way we can find out what the situation is. If there really is something personal going on that they need to address, we always say, absolutely, you should do that. But what is not
Yes.
okay is not telling us about it, and as much as you're comfortable with, so that we can help you fill the gaps, because we're
Mm.
happy to do that. But we can't do that if we don't know what's happening. And otherwise we'll turn into a bunch of blaming people and ruin our culture.
Yes, right. Well, that's I love that is so intentional, Christy. Like, but you have to be mindful of that. Otherwise, you could just have stories like this person doesn't really care, or they're not engaged. But you're
Right.
being intentionally right. Like you're actually going and asking the question, creating the experience or the opportunity for this person to share,
Yes.
inviting them, right, to do
Yes.
that.
Yes.
I come from unfortunately a nice guy background. I just recorded a couple episodes of my other podcasts, sharing those journeys. But talk about, that challenge for those people that think they're being kind, but they're not truly being kind. They're just being nice, trying to get along just to get along,
Mhm.
and really to the opposite of what you're saying, not, trying to make excuses or not. They're just like, oh, this will just blow over, or just kind of they're not being, again, not the authentic self. They're actually just
Right.
trying to get along. And what have you seen in your as a
Well, what
business owner
I
and doing
in my own
that? Yeah.
experience, what I see is when people are self-forgetting like that,
Mhm.
and they're just like kind of like we talk about this in terms of, for example, working with clients and setting boundaries around what that
Yes.
relationship is going to look like. I'm
Mhm.
sure you've heard the saying, "Good fences make good neighbors." And
Yes.
so it's the same kind of thing when we start out with a client. We encourage the project manager working directly with the client to establish ground rules with them. Like if they're a West Coast
Mm.
client, for example, and we're in the East Coast, that we say, our workday ends at 5 or whatever it happens to be. But if you have an emergency, absolutely, we will help
Yeah.
you with that in any case. But that's not a normal kind of thing. And what
Mhm.
I learned years ago was that some of my employees didn't know they could do that. When I said something, someone told me something once, and I said, well, you can say no. And her eyes got real big and she was like, really? And I was like, okay, wow. I have not taught people about boundaries because
Yes.
if you don't teach people about boundaries from the very beginning. What happens is they'll do the thing where it's like, okay, it's fine, I'll do it. That tone of voice, it's really not fine.
Mhm.
And then
Mhm.
they do it. And then they build resentment.
Yep.
And it can be kind of just a general resentment, maybe not even or misdirected at someone, but they become resentful.
Yep.
Resentful people become passive aggressive.
Yes.
And that's when, that's like nailing jello to a wall. When somebody says something that's like someone saying to me like, "Wow, I really like your glasses, red. Who wears red?" Something like that. And
Yeah.
you're like, "Wait," and they're like, "Well, no, I was just complimenting you." And you're like, "Wait, what?" So the passive aggressive you do not want anywhere in your relationship, your family, you want nothing to do with that. And it
Mhm.
has to start all the way back at boundaries. That's
Mhm.
where the kindness begins. And
Yes.
what I try and impress upon people is the importance of kindness to yourself as well. And you
Mhm.
are
Mhm.
responsible for that, for setting your own boundaries for things that you're comfortable with and things, you know, up with you will not put.
Mhm. Mhm.
So yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's so much there in the boundaries, and I think you were talking about, um, it starts with, like, understanding who you are about yourself in your natural, like you said, we were talking earlier before we started recording. I was talking about the nurture side of folks. I just worked with a couple recently, uh, 2 business owners, and one was very nurturing and, just like you said, naturally, actually, just a harmonizer, just naturally is a good thing.
Mhm.
But she didn't speak up, and she felt really railroaded on this other person. And,
Mhm.
like you said, didn't create good boundaries, and
Mhm.
wasn't able, and the other person wasn't aware either that they were railroading
Mhm.
as much. And so they thought they were being kind in certain things. I don't think it was malicious, but I think there's just a lack of awareness on some of these things.
Yeah,
You know?
the awareness piece cannot be overestimated in its importance.
Mhm.
Um, I think about when you talk about railroading, when I started learning, our organization uses the Enneagram,
Mhm.
which your listeners may
Yep.
or may not be familiar
Yep.
with. It's kind of all out there now, a lot of it. But
Yeah.
the reason I like the Enneagram is because it's about motivation for behavior as opposed to
Mhm.
behavior. Because a lot of
Yes.
behavior can look the same, but
Yep.
why are you behaving that way?
Yes.
So when I started learning about my own type in the Enneagram, and I realized that, to your point, that I can be very direct, and I
Mhm.
I am a verbal processor, and I process quickly, which
Yeah.
doesn't make me smarter. It can make me impulsive, actually, and
Mhm.
also annoying, by the way, because I can end up, talking really fast, getting very directive, and somebody who processes more slowly, whose whose brain I want to pick. I wanna know what they
Yes.
know that I don't know, but if I'm so busy talking like that, they shut down, and then I
Yes.
never get the benefit of learning what they know or getting their idea or feedback or input or whatever that is. So learning that about yourself and in my experience of the Enneagram and probably most personality
Mhm.
types that you can delve into, that once you learn about your own type and then you learn about other types because you want to learn how to work with them,
Mhm.
that in my experience has created the groundwork for radical empathy. because it literally takes you out of your own head and you're like, oh, I see. That person processes more slowly. I used to jokingly say I could ask my old accountant a question and then I could scroll through my newsfeed for a while she came up with the answer. And it was like, but I wanted her, I wanted to give her that time. And so I
Yes.
have to realize that I need to just be patient and stop talking and give them the time. And the silence isn't awkward anymore. But when you first do it, it feels a little awkward, but just allowing people to take the time to do that.
That is so, I mean, I'm so glad to hear you say that, Christy, because I think I've worked with business owners and I don't where they didn't see that, and then they built up these stories about other people, like you said, like
Oh,
this person is just you can come up with a story, and it was and unfortunately we create stories to support our narrative, although that narrative may be completely false and wrong,
right.
and so it's like to be
Yes.
challenged, right?
And
So
it
you're
probably
challenging
is
yourself.
false and wrong. Let's be clear. The
Yeah.
story that we tell ourselves in our head is not grounded in reality frequently. It's grounded in our experiences and all the different things that we know that has brought us here.
Yep.
But it's not necessarily, and it's usually not a good story either, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's
Yeah.
just that default mode network in our brains that we've evolved to ties to our subconscious. If I'm doing it wrong, they're judging me. Things
Yep.
aren't right, all that kind of stuff. And so of course we make up these horrible stories that don't serve us or the person we're working with well either.
And again, if you don't know this about yourself, so I've used Enneagram. I think it's a great resource. I use also we've talked about the 5 voices tool is another one that we've talked about in this podcast previously. I'm a connector voice in the 5 voices. Also, it's a 9 in the Enneagram. But the idea of a connector is always trying to reach out, connect with folks. So again, if people
Mhm,
reject that, I take it if I'm not conscious, I'm not being
mhm.
aware, it may or may not be personal. And so I have to really assess, is this person truly, is it really personal, or are they just having a bad day, or they've got other things that they've got to deal with? And so
Right.
it's taken a while of working at that, understanding my mind. And again, this is where I feel like working with a solid team like you have, Christy, and training an organization, that makes a big difference because that team is aware internally and externally. Like you said, they look at the team members and they also look at their clients because it's the same thing, right? As you're
Right.
working with a client, their response may be different than what you were expecting.
Yeah, and I think that just being able, obviously we don't type our clients,
Yeah.
but having that awareness
Yeah.
around that kind of thing makes people aware of like, well, this is behavior.
Hmm.
I don't know why they're doing it. I frequently say that we don't know the sandbox in which our clients are playing, but we'll
Hmm.
jump in there and help them dig their way out. And
Right.
so frequently, if someone is behaving in a certain way, we don't know why, and you
Hmm.
just have to be like, okay, well, that's a thing, and 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 keep it there. In fact, there's something that I learned from a coach and that I share when I speak about when you get feedback or if you're in a difficult conversation, like if the client is being unkind to you for whatever reason, that if you can even kind of step back a little bit and imagine a bowl sitting in front of you and
Hmm.
just whatever kind of bowl you want. I always picture like a copper bowl and
Hmm.
that everything they're saying is going in the bowl. And that way
Hmm.
it's not going down inside of you.
Yep.
And it allows you to respond instead of react because you've given
Hmm.
yourself the gift of a little bit of distance.
That's a great perspective. I like that. So just visualizing, you're putting a bowl out in front of you. It's all going in there, and then you
Mhm.
can decide, okay, what is relevant? What do I need to take out of that one? What do I need to leave there on the
Correct.
table?
Yes,
You know?
exactly. What do I leave in and what do I take out and respond to?
Yeah, that's because I think especially in today's age, Christy, we get so much information and so much stuff coming at us, and so it's like, hold on, I don't need to just let this just open the door to everything that's coming in, right?
Yes. Yes. In fact, I used to years ago, there was a saying about you wouldn't let somebody come and throw trash all over your front yard. And yet
Hmm.
you allowed trash to get into your head, whatever kind
Hmm.
that could be, but all sorts of
Hmm.
garbage gets to your point, so much coming at us. I don't believe our brains were meant to process this much information this
Hmm.
quickly,
Yeah.
which is why I meditate every day.
Hmm.
Because I have got to start a day with stillness instead of
Yep.
picking up my phone and looking at a news feed or email or text messages, something that is going to direct my day other than the way I want it to go.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, that's again, we have a lot of crossover, Christy, because I do meditation as well. I think that's important for again being mindful and self aware. And I think once you kind of alluded to this, once you're self aware, can you talk a little bit about a little more about your vulnerability, because this is something, number one, you might be aware. The next part I feel like is like, oh, can I actually share this with anybody? How do
Yes.
I do this so that I don't want to look like an idiot or just something like somebody thinking less of me,
Yes.
you know?
I was somebody back in the day, probably 14, 15 years ago, I would have gone to the mattress saying that vulnerability is weakness. And
Mhm.
then the magical Brene Brown did her 2010
Oh,
TED
yeah.
Talk, and it changed my life. I
Yeah.
watched it probably 20 times. It was just like, wait, what? What? And so then I started reading her books and started studying
Mm.
and learning and trying to practice vulnerability, which was hard for me.
Yes.
I don't think it comes naturally given the society in which we live,
Yep.
especially when you have all of these social media things with people presenting false
Yep.
fronts who they actually are. So the real vulnerability is not a natural default for us. You have to
Mhm.
work at that. So
Yep.
for me, over the years, I've worked at it, and I try to, what I coach other people on is saying, especially if you work in an organization, you clearly have to decide how safe it is for you to be vulnerable and to whom.
Mhm.
That's very important.
Right.
If you are a leader in a large organization, you can establish that vulnerability out and down with your team,
Mm.
but maybe not up. You have to determine that. And if you own your own business or you're a leader in that way, you can lead with vulnerability. You get to set the tone for that. And I'm fortunate enough to be able to do that. And
Yes.
so, the way that I do that is making sure that when I'm in a meeting, like especially with the leadership team or something, that I don't have all the answers,
Mm.
that
Mhm.
I make it clear that my job is to ask the right questions.
Yes.
I don't have if I have the answers, well, then what are they doing here?
Right.
And so collectively we can, I always say the sum is greater than the whole of its parts. And
Yes.
collectively we can come up with much better ideas than me just being a general and telling everybody what to do.
Mhm.
That just doesn't appeal to me. It's easier to be a general, to just be
Mm.
like, go do it. I don't care what you think. It needs to be done by here. And if it's not, you're on a pip and then you're out of here. That's much
Mhm.
easier than being like quiet and vulnerable and acknowledging that you don't have all the answers, acknowledging when you've made a mistake, being open to ideas that are different than yours. And maybe if something you've done has worked out not right, being willing to own that and say, yeah, that was on me. You know, um, in my experience in my organization, when I do that and I teach my leadership team to do it, then it filters out to everyone and people feel free
Mhm.
to acknowledge, like, yeah, you know what, I kind of slipped up on that one. And then nobody's mad at you about it either. They're like, oh, that's nice. They acknowledged it. And how do we help fix the situation?
That's so important, Christy, because you're right. It does come from the top down. I think as whatever level people feel that they can share that vulnerability, at a certain point, it's like, oh well, nope, I'm not going to share it. I don't know. And so it can be, like you said, if you're not conscious of that, um, it can be very destructive. I remember reading the book. I think we might have talked about this, but the book "Start with Why" by Simon Sinek's a great
Oh
book.
yeah.
And in that book, he gives a story about a woman getting on an airplane. He's getting on an airplane, and this woman's like yelling at the people to get in line and da da da. And he's like, "Why are you doing this?" She's like, "Well, if I don't do this, I could lose my job." And there's just the fear in there, and
Yeah.
in the space, like you said, of like it goes all the way down, and then you're to the client experience and like, what is going on here,
Right.
right?
You know, being human is hard. I mean, there's a lot going on,
Mhm.
and trying to understand your own motivations and moderate your own behavior, much less understand why people you don't even know are behaving in a certain way and either responding or not. It's a lot.
Mhm.
It's really a lot. And so that's why I go back to self-awareness, because the only thing you can control is, you're going to compare. That's
Yep.
something our brains are designed to do, but you control what you do with that comparison.
Yeah.
You're going to see ugly behavior. You control what you do in response, if any, to that ugly
Mhm.
behavior. That's the only thing you can do. And that's again where I say, protecting yourself, being kind to yourself, and making sure you don't allow too much garbage. Like if someone is, mean to you getting on a plane or something, you can either brush that off, let it go and be like, they're having a bad day. They don't even know me. It's got nothing to do with me. And
Yep.
then go enjoy your flight. Or you can get all ticked off and have it ruin you, ruminate on it, and be like, next
Mhm.
when I see her getting off this plane, I'm going to give her what for? Well, that doesn't serve you well.
Right. And that's where I think, unfortunately, like you said, Christy, I know, I love that you guys are all about content, getting the messaging out there correctly, because I think there's a lot of, unfortunately, bad we know how human mind works and how to trigger people in an unhealthy way,
Yes.
with very, I mean, I see the headlines and things that they're constantly trying to trigger you, and it's definitely not to a place of kindness or empathy, right?
No, usually not, because that doesn't get clicks, does it? It's not clickbait.
Mm-hmm.
It's not as it doesn't give you that kick to the
Mm-hmm.
amygdala that we all seem to want, as humans. So, yeah, I think, but again, it's a choice.
Yep.
And I always think about, how do I want to be perceived?
Mm-hmm.
What kind of imprint do I want to leave on people? And,
Mm-hmm.
and even when, you get on the phone with, sometimes you have to call, and then you go through a different decision tree, which is so annoying. And then you finally get to somebody, and then they can't really help you. And I was on the phone the other day. What was I doing? I can't remember. I was trying to do something, and the platform was just taking me around and around and around in circles. So I was on the phone with this woman, and she was trying to help me. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so frustrated here." And I said, "This is so not your fault. I can't, I just can't even believe this." And so we're doing, and finally I was like, "Oh, good Lord, look what I did." And I was like, I was the one. And I said, "Thank you for your patience." She said, "I think I would have been a lot more irritated than you were." And I was like, "Well, thank you, for
Mm-hmm.
putting up with my irritation here." Because I try to remember that when I have a justifiably bad experience, but
Yep.
it's usually not that person's fault.
Mm-hmm.
Something has happened, and then they get the brunt of it. And I always try and remember, they are having a lot of people give them a hard time. Like, remember when everything happened with Delta Airlines, with that
Oh yeah.
whole thing? So I had to call to do something. And so I called, and the woman answered the phone, and I said, "Hey, I bet you're having a good week." And she was just like, "Oh." And I said, "Well, I'm not angry. I don't have a problem. I just need some help." And she was like, "Oh, well, then I like you." And she stayed on the phone with me for 45 minutes, figuring out some complex ticketing thing I needed to do. But it was just starting with that little bit of humor, because I thought she's
Yes.
probably been through it. You know,
Right.
I mean, because people are frustrated and they can't get anywhere, and they're calling her, and she's the front line, and she
Mm-hmm.
is getting it, and you
Yep.
just try and have some humanity,
Mm-hmm.
empathy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the empathy, and I think the awareness going in, like you said, when you know that their tensions are high, or things of like you're already like planning to like de-escalate, like I know they're probably on edge, and so how can I come in there, you know, with it. One of the tools I use in the giant framework is called the support challenge matrix. So you've got to have both, right? You have to support, and then there's a challenge you follow up with. Sometimes, and again, I think our natural voice order, what I heard you say, Christy, is sometimes you might have, in the past, you might have been just challenging people, like here's the thing that needs to be done, here's, challenge, 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 which is very needed. But
Mhm.
you have to, in my experience, lead with support first, and then bring in the challenge and the
Yes.
questions.
Yes, I would agree with that. I think that, that it was funny. I always laugh, because I'm like, nobody in my organization is scared of me at all. They don't do what I ask them to do. Part of the time it's because I'm not clear about it, and that's
Yep.
on me. Back to your point,
Yep.
when you're talking about that, the clarity is very important, and I try and
Hmm.
now say, "Have I been clear?"
Yep.
But it was funny, I was talking with my, EVP of business development. She's brilliant at sales, just everything she does. And at one point, I wanted her to build this sales playbook, so when she hired another salesperson, she didn't have to go through the whole thing of, like, one-on-one teaching. She'd be like, "Here you go.
Hmm.
Come at me with the questions, but that's it." And so she kind of wasn't doing it. We were sitting there talking. I've known her. She's been here for 10 years. And I said, why aren't you doing it?" And she goes, "I don't know." And I said, "Well, just do it." I said, "I'm not doing this to make your life difficult. I'm doing it because I don't want you to have a hard time training somebody again." And she was like, "I know." And then, she went and did it, and it was
Yeah.
great. She got it done. But sometimes just challenging someone with, like, "Why aren't you doing it?"
Mhm,
Like,
mhm.
not meanly, but just like, seriously, what
No,
are you
that's being kind,
why
right?
are you doing it? Because I
That
wasn't doing it, like, mad at her. I was just like,
Yeah.
"What's going on? Why don't you want to do this?"
Mhm,
And it was funny when she was like, "I don't know. I don't know why."
mhm, mhm. Well,
Sometimes just naming it.
I like your value of being curious, like, what is it, and not coming from an like you said, not an accusatory way, but I think it's important that's being kind, asking those questions, coming from a place of it's supportive, but also, like, saying, "Hey, I know you're capable of this. We need this." And it's not a dispute. I'm not, trying to, throw shade on you, so to speak, but,
Right.
just, and I think there's an art to this of learning how to do this well. Chrissy, you probably learned over
Yeah,
time, like how to,
certainly over time.
engage
And,
people.
part of it too, I think, David, is the longevity too. If you've had
Yes.
people that have worked with you for a while, and they've
10
seen
years,
how
yeah.
you behave, they know that you mean what you say, and you say what you mean, then,
Mhm.
that makes that kind of conversation easier, because I
Much
know
easier.
my intention is never, I'm not like that. I just don't, I just am not that way. And so they
Well,
know that I'm not going to be like, whatever, and
yeah.
like that.
Well, that to me is growing a successful business is like with WG content, where you've been doing this for 20 years. I think sometimes business owners can be short-sighted in what you just said. Building and having those long-term relationships with your team members, it makes things go so much smoother if it's done well. Can be
Yes.
your productivity and what you can do. And sometimes they think, well, I could just find somebody else that could do this. Well, yes, you could, but it just takes time to build a relationship.
And you know
And I
what?
think we're in a disposable society where people are
That
like,
just made me think of something that I say a lot, and I'm glad you brought this up because I
yeah,
say frequently to my team that positions are replaceable, people are not. So if somebody leaves and they're in a certain spot, we can probably find another project manager or things like that, but we can't find that person and the
yeah,
special magic that she brings to the situation. And so that's one of the core tenets of my leadership. And what I've learned over time is that a human need that we all share is the need to know that we matter. That
yes,
we matter, not the work we produce, not how we look, but that you actually matter. Your hopes and dreams and your being matter. And that is a core tenet, like I said, of my leadership. And I think that that's why that's been very helpful in building the culture that we
oh
have.
my goodness. Yeah, I can't, I mean, tell you, Christy, like I was with another company for about 9 years. It was a great company, environmental consulting firm, and they have had people there for 20 plus years since they started. And that consistency of people, it really allows you to scale and really creates
Yes.
stability in the organization.
Yeah.
Where I've worked with another client where they seem to have people coming in every 6 to 12 months where there's a rotation. So it's not like
Right.
some people leave and then some people come in. And it's really challenging to kind of get up over this hump of like, well, we can only get to this level because we just haven't built the relational trust.
Hmm.
We just haven't built the
Yeah.
relationships, period. I mean, it's really hard, especially in today's world where we have what I call a distributed workforce, where you might not even have people come into the office,
Yeah,
like we
and
used to do.
we're virtual, and we always have been virtual, and yet
Mhm.
we've still been able to build a very like weave a tapestry, as I say, of a
Yep.
very excellent culture. But one of the things too that I say about having longevity in employees, and this is what the book I wrote is called Your Cultural Balance Sheet, talking about a hidden cost is turnover. To your point, when you bring that
Yeah.
up, that it's not just there is absolutely an emotional impact when a person leaves. And I think
Mhm.
frequently leaders, a lot of us in the world like to think that we are rational beings who occasionally have feelings, but we're actually feeling people who occasionally think, right? And then we try
Yes.
and rationalize all the things we do, but it's actually feeling that's driving it.
Yes.
So when a
Yes.
person leaves, people are bereft or they're surprised or they might be scared or they might be worried. You never know what's going on, but there's
Yep.
definitely an emotion around it. And on top of
Mhm.
the emotion it's like having, I heard this, I think it's like a proverb of some
Mhm.
culture, I don't know which, that when someone leaves your business, it's like an entire library has just burned down
Mm.
because all of the institutional knowledge and the years and the relationships and all the things that they had just walked out your door.
Yep.
That's devastating to a business, or it should be, and if it's not, maybe you might wanna take a look at that because
Yes.
that's a big deal.
Yeah. No, it's so true. And and what you said, the example of with your sales leader, just the ability to have the conversation, having developed the relationship for over 10 years, and to really get at the root of things very quickly in a very kind way, versus it could take, that could take a lot longer if they're just been there 6 months or a year of like, okay,
Right.
I'm still figuring out where you're at in this
Yeah,
process. What do you know? What you don't know? I
yeah.
mean,
I think we're really lucky in that a lot of our employees come from referrals, or
mm,
they've been a contractor with us for a period of time, and then they join us. So they have a working knowledge kind of who
yes.
we are and how we work.
Mhm.
So that's also very helpful. And then when new people come in, the thing that they always say, because we have 34 people, so I meet with everybody at some point when they join just to get to know them and talk a little bit. And to a person, they have all said, "I can't believe how kind everybody is." I thought that was just a thing. You just said it, but it's like the genuine kindness with which I've been
Yes.
greeted, and that people
Mhm.
have helped me to acclimate, to make sure I have what I need, and all of that kind of thing. And that I'm really proud of. And that, as I always say to my team, I cast the vision, but you guys live it out every day. And if
Mhm.
you didn't,
Mhm.
it wouldn't be what it is. So, we won best places to work here in town, and my team was congratulating me. And I'm like, why are you congratulating me? You guys are the ones who make it the best place to work. You know what I mean? Again, I cast the vision and make sure that I always have my eye on the culture in terms of decisions that I make, but they're the ones who live it out every day and bring their best selves to work. That makes it.
I love that, Christy. Well, I think, and that's a well-run organization. And as people, again, going to the focus of we're talking about kindness on the episode here of getting people in their right positions too, and like understanding like, hey, right, this is what you do best, in helping them. And then when they're not doing those things that are not in their best interest, like how do we help each other? Like you said earlier, how do we help each other in the team?
Yeah.
That creating that workout, we're looking after each other.
Well, and getting the people like for us, we usually tend to get the right people on the bus, and sometimes we need to shuffle them around into a different seat, because we hire a lot for culture. I mean, we really do. And then, and not so much with the actual writing, that those people are brilliant writers, but they have to be a cultural fit as well. But we have PMs, we have people that work in HR, we have marketing, we have different departments of people that do things, and trying to really understand someone's zone of genius, and then setting them up for success by enabling them to do things that are in their zone of genius. And I think that's a mark of leadership, is being willing to do that, as opposed to just being like, we hired you to do this, it's not working, see ya. And it's like, yeah, but you're really a fit for this company. And I know you have a zone of genius. I know you do. Everybody does. We just need to find it.
Yeah, it's both. I had an executive recruiter on the podcast a few weeks ago, and we were talking about that, Christy, of like, you want to make sure that that's a cultural fit, because there's nothing worse than having somebody technically like, oh, they fit the bill, but then they're like, 6 months, 8 months, 12 months down the line, they're like, it's just not a good fit. You know? And that's a tough one. That's a really
we've
tough.
been really fortunate in that. I can tell you that I can count on one hand the number of people who have left the company over time. We've continued to grow because we were obviously a lot smaller. But there have been a couple people that have had to leave, and they really weren't cultural fits. And sometimes as the leader, when somebody isn't a fit, and this was on me, I was not clear enough in my direction that this person needs to go. I knew it was going to be a problem. And then it blew up and became a problem where it's like, all right, that's it. And I thought, that's a shame. I should have been more clear in saying, all right, I want you to start like saying, okay, look, this is the behavior we're seeing. This is what we can't have. We need to see an improvement, and then mark it down and then exit, that kind of thing. And instead it became an unpleasant situation with her manager. But again, as a leader, I think it's important to see that and be clear-eyed about it. It's that the adage of hire slow, fire fast. And that's often painful for leaders to do. I've seen that cause more damage in organizations than a lot of things.
I've been there. And that's not being kind. You're like, oh, I'm just trying to I want to figure it out. And if you really know, it's like, why are we prolonging this?
Correct.
That's painful. And I, as you were talking to the other thing, again, understanding ourselves, here's the thing that people, if you're not aware and as you're listening to this, I think people may present a certain way because they think, oh, this is accepted, right? And I'm thinking, this is the right way I should be, and it's not their authentic self, and they can only keep that up for so long.
Yes, exactly. In fact, we were just talking about this the other day in a team meeting, and my HR coordinator was saying one of the things that is an initiative of ours is how can we do something 10% better? So you don't have to change everything, just what can you do 10% better? And she was talking about recruiting. And she said that what she's done is she's changed the interview from half an hour, and she now allows 45 minutes. And she said, no, if it ends after 30 minutes, that's fine. But I realized that with that extra 15 minutes, I can dig in a little more and really get a better feel for whether or not this person is a fit. And largely, she's looking for a lot of contractors too, because we have the group of contractors that we work with, upwards of 100 of them. And so we want them to be a fit too, especially if we're going to be putting them in front of our clients. We want to make sure that they are furthering our mission, which is building relationships one word at a time. So we want to make sure that they understand that and that they're committed to our values and our mission as well. And so just looking at, like you said, kind of digging under the hood a little bit and making sure that this isn't just play acting.
Yeah. Well, and I think especially in the recruiting space, like you say, Christy, because people want the job. And so like, how can I just be like that? But then, like you said, really getting at it, is this truly who you are? Asking some more probing questions, or is it you're just trying to present this way because that's what you think we want.
Right. I'm sure you and your audience have heard the thing that sometimes the best sales sales call that a prospective employee has is the one they have selling themselves.
Mhm.
Like in the interview, that's it. And then the rest of the time they are dismal at selling. If, like, for example, if you're
Yeah.
interviewing for sales and they're great at selling themselves, and then you're like, why aren't they producing anything? It's like,
Mhm.
oh, because you're really not good at that. You just sold me on you. That was it.
Right, right. And again, it goes back again, if you're authentic and you know this self and they say, well, what about this? Or how have you done this? I always like to ask the questions of where they face challenges or how they've addressed some of these things. Because if
Same.
they say, well, I really haven't had any problems, really challenges. Really? Nothing? I'm
Yeah.
like, no, I'm good. I'm
Well,
like,
and that's your
I've had
growth.
lots.
Same, and I think that the challenges are your growth edge.
Yes.
Even back to speaking about vulnerability, I think that never ends.
Yeah.
You keep working at it, and
Mhm.
you have to have. I frequently say you have to have attention, well, intention and attention towards your
Mm,
intentions. And so, being vulnerable, it's really easy to close back up and not do that. You have to keep working at it, right? As
right.
with any self-awareness, personal development skill, it isn't like one and done. Like, oh, good, now I'm self-aware, I can just move on.
Yes.
Sadly, it's a constant it's constant work, right?
Yes, it's ongoing. Man, Christy, there's so many good things in here. You tell me a little bit. I know we're getting close to the end of the episode, but I know some of the things, initiatives that you've been doing. You've been doing this mastermind group that you've been starting, and doing just some other
Yeah.
cool things that you're creating for folks to be a part of. So we could just share a little bit about that.
Well, my own personal audacious goal, which I try to get used to saying, is to reinvent the way people look at the world of work.
Mm,
Because we spend so much time there, I think there should be joy in
mm,
that, and
yes.
that sense of knowing that you matter, that you're doing meaningful work, that you're making a contribution. And I always talk about life-work balance as opposed to work-life balance, and I mean that. I think it's
Mm,
absurd for grown adults who can control themselves to have to ask permission to live their life,
mm,
to go vote
mm,
or to go pick up a kid from school or go to a doctor appointment. It's your time. You do what you want.
yes.
I'm not gonna get into that. Um, oh my gosh, the question just flew right out of my head.
It's just what you're doing some work with the mastermind group. You're getting help
Oh, yeah,
creating
yeah,
a
yeah.
space.
Sorry, I'm sorry. Like,
Yeah,
I derailed myself.
that's all
So
good.
anyway,
All good.
to that end, I wrote a book called Your Cultural Balance Sheet, which will be
Yes.
published in January. And
Awesome.
it was because I was having dinner with some other business owner friends, and we were talking. They had had successful exits, meaning talking about EBITDA, which is the value of your business, and
Yep.
all and multiples, all those kind of things. And I said, it's almost like, I said, of course I look at my financials. Of course I do.
Mhm.
I said, but it's almost like I look through my business through the lens of a cultural balance sheet. And so
Mm.
one of my friends looked at me and he's like, well, there's your book. I was like, oh,
Yay.
do that. So I started thinking about that and thinking about, what I wanted to do is try to help people be more effective leaders.
Yes.
That when you're building an organization, you have the privilege of feeding into the lives of the people that work with you. And so
Mhm.
I started thinking bigger about that. Like, okay, I want to go and speak about that, and I want to share that with people. And
Mhm.
my driver has never really been money, but as many people say, do what you love, and the money will come.
Yep.
So my driver for that is really to help make the world a better place. That
Mhm.
if we become more self-aware, then we become kinder people. We become
Yes.
more empathetic. And so looking at the world of work as an entry point for that,
Yep.
and then to that end, I'm in a beta test with the mastermind that we don't really know what we're going to call it yet.
Mhm.
We're getting people together from across the country, from right now in healthcare, which is the space we work, all from different organizations, so that they can speak freely about
Yes.
whatever's happening in their lives. And the intention is to build a program that would serve people, hopefully across all industries, probably at a manager level, that have
Mhm.
4 or 5 direct reports. Get them when
Mhm.
they don't have access to a lot of leadership training. They probably don't have peer groups at that
Yep.
point, and
Yep.
help them really focus on personal development, but on self-awareness, and
Yeah.
really learn to access your feelings first, to lead with your feeling.
Mhm.
And in that way, we help people become better people. We make the world a better place, and hopefully we reinvent the way people look at the world of work.
I love it. I mean, you're speaking to my mission too, as steward your business, and we're on the same mission, Christy, to reach people where they're at.
Yes.
You particularly right now in the medical field, I've been in the environmental consulting world for years. I think there's so many people, um, like, how do we help them take all this knowledge that's out there and apply it to their lives, like you said, effectively? I think that's the challenge right now. We've got so much information. It's about, how do I actually take this information, this tool or resource, and actually apply it to my life? in a
Well, I think
meaningful way.
we know that that's where most initiatives fail, whether it's in business or personal, is in the action step, right?
Mhm,
We have all these
mhm.
grand ideas, how many times, well, maybe not you, but every woman who's listening has gone on a diet, January 1 or 2, and been like, okay, this is it. I'm doing it now. And then,
Mhm.
you don't stick with it. Or you do these very extreme things and the action breaks down. Instead
Mhm.
of, for me at my ripe old age, I figured out like it's about being kind to myself and setting
Yep.
reasonable goals. Like
Yes.
every 30 days saying, okay, I'm going to do this particular meditation for the next 30 days. And
Mhm,
then reevaluate at the end of that and be like, I really liked that. So maybe I'll pick a
mhm.
different one. I'm going to do it again for 30 days so that I've got a little measurable chunk of thing that isn't overwhelming to me where like I have to change my entire life so I can do this one thing.
Yes. Yeah, I call that, I have a framework that I use, called the impossible game, where it's like this big audacious goal like you wanna have, right? But it's like reverse engineering it, like you said,
Yes.
it's like, what is it that on this monthly, weekly, daily level that I do
Mhm.
incrementally, because we know over time, that's what gets you there.
Yes.
We're not don't just jump there, but it's all these things over time that get us there, and so being
Yes.
mindful of that, like you said, Christy,
Yeah.
and kind to yourself, you can actually get there.
There's a book that I read, and it's one of the best books I've ever read, and it's called How Will You Measure Your Life? And the author's last name is Christensen, I believe. And it's a wonderful book. He was a professor at Harvard Business School, and he had gone there too. And he saw all these high performing people, right? You graduate from HBS, you pretty much got the
Yeah.
world oyster, right? And so what he noticed in his own life was when he graduated, 5-year reunion, everybody was still happy. By 10 years, there were a lot of rumblings. People weren't happy. By the time you got to 20 years, it was like they were miserable. A lot of them were
Mm,
divorced. They had addiction issues, or they hated their jobs. And then they're tied to them because they've got the 2 homes, the kids in private schools, the fancy cars, and you can't get away from it. And his
mhm,
whole point, kind of to your point of incremental, was saying, look at your life now while you are
mhm.
that high performing person, that student. And
Yep.
I tell this to my son who's at Georgetown Law School, and I've taught this to him. It's like, think about what you want your life to look like when you're 40.
Yeah.
When I say that to young people that I meet in their 20s, most of them, their eyes kind of get big and they're like, oh my gosh, I never thought about that. And I'm like, I know, because your head's down. You're doing the hard work right now. But
Mhm,
if you don't do that, somebody else will
mhm.
plan that for you. And it won't
Yep.
be for your benefit. So if you
Mhm.
can, nobody taught me that. I wish somebody
Yeah.
would have when I was
Ah,
young. Like,
yeah.
what do I want it to look like
Mhm.
when I'm 35, 45,
Yeah,
55?
ask those
You know?
questions.
Yeah, and again, to your point, it's not like you have to go do something major right now. It's those little teeny behaviors that you start when you're in your 20s while you're
Mhm.
laying the track for the rest of your life that allow you to then have the life that you want later, and I think it's the same with any goal.
Yeah, I love that. Christy, it has been so great having you on the podcast. I love all our conversation. I think we definitely have to have you come back.
I would love
And
to come back once the book I'll send you a book when
yeah,
it's published, and then, hopefully I can come back and we can dig into that a little more.
yeah, so what's the best way for people to find you, connect with WG content and whatnot? Yeah.
They can go to wgcontent.com. They can find me. I'm right on the homepage with a video about who we are, why we do what we do, and then also just the our team page. Also on
Uh-huh.
LinkedIn, I'm just Christy Pretzinger on LinkedIn, and you can find me there. And on LinkedIn, we post the podcast that I've been on. So obviously this one will be posted
Yeah.
once it's live. I think we're a little behind in terms of getting them up there because I've done quite a few. So
Yeah, no, I'm
we're
super
definitely coming.
excited. I'm
Yeah.
super excited for the book, so you definitely need to come back when you talk about the book when that's published. This has just been a refreshing conversation, and I totally appreciate you coming on and just sharing
I
your
really appreciate
experience
you
and
having
wisdom.
me. I've really enjoyed our conversation. I think we're very like-minded. That's fun.
Absolutely. Well, thanks everybody for listening to the Business Roundtable podcast. Until next time, take care, everybody. Be well. Thanks.